Anuki Nasat Huntwy Sanan Atum-Rayay.
Wu-Nuwaup Sakhamtat Nadjartat Amuntat.
And we are student teachers of the Master Teacher, Panabab Yanun, also known as His Excellency, Dr. Malachi Kobina Zodak York, the Master Teacher, the Master of Heavens and Earth. We want to start this class by proclaiming the innocence of the Master Teacher in his false incarceration under the bogus charges that he has been kidnapped for. The facts of the case speak for themselves. If you just do your thorough, diligent research, you will see that the heinous crimes he was accused of, it's impossible for him to commit. We'd like to start this class with two readings.
The first reading, entitled The Negro. 1. Nuwaupians of Wu-Nuwaup, just what is a Negaru, and how do you recognize a Negro? They are both males and females. In the Adamite race's Webster's Dictionary, it says, Negro from Spanish and Portuguese, black, a member of any of the indigenous dark-skinned peoples of Africa, a person having some African ancestors, a black person. Is this true? No. 3. They also list the word Negroid and says it means designating of or of one of the major groups of human beings, including most of the people of Africa. Is this true? No. 4. Nuwaupians of Wu-Nuwaup. Negroes are, in actual fact, those blacks kidnapped from Africa by Arabs and Europeans and enslaved, forced to accept others' cultures and religions and way of life, and, after indoctrinations, accepted being subhuman. Slaves, mentally, physically, and spiritually. They accept the Bible and the Quran, the religions of Adamites, as if it's their own, proudly proclaiming, I'm a Christian, from the Europeans. I'm Moorish, from the Portuguese. I'm a Muslim, from the Arabs. Each who took a part in the enslavement of the black race. 5. You can look up the word Negro as Negroes in Latin to Spanish for black. 6. You can look up the word Moor, Morenos, as Moorish from Portuguese for darkies. 7. Or you can look in their Bible on the New Testament, book of Acts 13, verse 1, and you will see nigger, from the Greek black, Hebrew Strong's number 3526, N-I-G-E-R, black, nigger. 10. And what and who is this referring to, Nuwaupians of Wu-Nuwaup? When you read verse 1 of chapter 14 of the book of Paul, self-appointed apostle and followers of Jesus. 11. Now they were in the church, and that was at Antioch. 12. Certain prophets and teachers, as Barnabas and Simeon, that was called nigger. 13. So this black man is their Bible called nigger, Greek for black-skinned. 14. And what was he, Nuwaupians of Wu-Nuwaup? A prophet, a teacher. That is what their own Bible records present as a nigger, as a Niger or nigger. 15. Prophet and teacher is not a bad word in the Bible. 16. This black man was there when the word Christian was first used, Acts 11, verse 26. Yet he, as an African, converted to the Adamite religions of worshiping the image of a non-African, as Jesus is depicted as a white man. 17. The same for an African who claims to be Moorish or Muslim. They have accepted and converted to a non-African as Muhammad, who is depicted as a ruddy man. And both, 18, and both whites and Arabs' enslavement of Africans, while their God by any name sent them to their own race, not Africa. 19. If you Nuwaupians of Wu-Nuwaup look at any map of Africa, you will see the Greek word Niger incorporated in countries such as Niger, a country in Africa north of Nigeria. 20. Both have the Greek word for black in their name. 21. So a Negro is not a person of Nigeria or Niger who recognizes themselves as Africans, proudly not American Negroes, called niggers by Euro-Americans Negroes, are mentally dead, slave-minded, servants of Euro-American to replace the stigma of the word niggard, a Scandinavian word which means a stingy person, miser, niggardliness. 22. As you see, it's Europeans who put the negative words black, dark, to set the record straight, as they say black is opposite to white. So you call them lepers in place of them calling you niggers. You see in their Bible, Exodus 4, verse 6, leprous as snow, and Numbers 12, verse 10, leprous white as snow. Niggers, blacks, lepers, whites. 23. And if you need further proof that the lepers are the white race transformed from the ruddy race, all you need to do is look in their own Bible and Quran, Talmud and Hadith, used where it distributes their prophets as ruddy. And the very name Adam is Hebrew, Greek, and Arabic, meaning ruddy, flush, reddish. And it was one of the Adamites, a son of Seth's son, Enoch's son, Methuselah's son, Lamech's son, Noah's son, Ham's son, Canaan, Genesis 5, verse 1 through 32. And this son of Ham, son of Noah, Genesis 9, verse 18, was Canaan, who was cursed with leprosy, Genesis 9, verse 25. And the book of Moses, Leviticus chapter 13, makes it very clear the results of this curse, turning the ruddy race of Adamites pale, white, or leprous, Leviticus 13, verse 1 through 59. Then Israelites remixed with them, Leviticus 14, verse 33 through 34. So in actual fact, to be called nigger or nigger as an insult would be the same to whites when you call them what their Bible teaches them, describes them as lepers. If you read Leviticus 13, you will see even the blonde and those with freckles, Leviticus 13, verse 30, and Leviticus 13, verse 39. And the very second verse, Leviticus 13, verse 2, you see the name Adam in Hebrew changed to man to hide the truth. 24. When an Adamite, ruddy person, shall have in the skin of this flesh arising a scab or a bright spot, and it will be in the skin of his flesh like the plague of leprosy, leper rosy. And note Leviticus 13, verse 11, it is an old leprosy in the skin of his flesh. So they had it from way back from the Canaanites, Genesis 10, verses 15 through 19. 25. So Nuwaupians of Wu-Nuwaup, to be called a Negroid is only to say of the original black race of Africa, where all people on this planet have their own origin accept non-African cultures or religions such as Judaism, Christianity, Islam, in any shape or form is to reject who and what you are by natural nature. 26. You're then a Negro. And to accept other than self and original kin is to accept his dialects of what you are not, to accept his religions, Mosesism, Jesusism, and Muhammadism in any form is to accept him is better than yourself and more worthy to receive messages from some supreme being, be he called God, Jesus, Allah, Jah. All these are Hebrew, Chaldean, Greek, German, Latin, Arabic, not any of the African dialects. 27. It's always they came into Africa with their religions, or one of us went out of Africa and converted, and returned to spread their religion inside of Africa. You were called by them Negroes, Morenos, Muslims, Moorish, Muslims, Fashasha, Hebrews, Israelites, Ishmaelites, Nazarites, and Christians. All of these come from the leper, and to accept any of them is to accept you're his Negro or nigger.
A second reading is entitled Alien Groups. It begins with a chart. At the top, the provider, Riskians, Pa Mukrasu, Tasu, the secret nine. From there you have Natharu, shapeshifter, and Anunnaki, shapeshifter, which produce blacks, Africans, deity, Asar, Osiris, from Sirius, browns, Indians, deity Krishna, Andromedans, Procyons, browns, Australians, deity Karore, Arcturians, yellows, Asians, deity Wandi, Draconians, reds, whites, Europeans, God, Odin, Palladians, Aldebarans. 1. Each had their own group of grays, crossbred, cloned, and some biogenetic or biomechanic. 2. How many have been crossbred with humanoids of all races, and some are being born finally, which was the master plan. 3. They came back from the future, back in machines, and replaced human emotions. 4. And the use of mechanics altered the genetics physically and mentally. 5. Such as today, you have no need for your pinky finger or toe. 6. With amplified speakers, the outside of your ears are not needed. 7. Soon male and female sexual partners will be replaced with robotic humanoid who look and feel physical. That took place in your past here on earth. 8. So love of others faded and the physical changed. 9. The brain grew. 10. The head grew. 11. The eyes grew. 12. The body, like now, don't have to be hard labor any longer, such as you don't have to cut down a tree to build. 13. Women don't have to peel a potato. 14. So the lack of use of the body's muscles means you will become thinner and thinner. 15. The climate change and race mixing means the extreme skin color will change. 16. All will look the same. No need of hair or fur. No one will or does wins the race in racism. And that concludes the readings for this shadow. And it's interesting how a lot of people don't realize that many of these readings are years old. And I just recently seen a video in the past week of Robotoy partners that are being designed as what they call alternatives, not to, as they said, not to replace a human being, but ultimately that's what they are. And they're designed to respond human. They have artificial intelligence, and they are programmed with even different languages, different voices. This is something that they are working on this day. And the master teacher is, again, more prophecy fulfilled. As the master says, how right does a man have to be before you acknowledge his divinity in human form? Are there any questions?
Rahubat. Is there, I seen something similar to that where they had a citizen in Arabia that was a robot that was just made a citizen. It was a female, and they had her on stage. I've seen several videos, and she's from Arabia. Well, they made this robot a citizen of Arabia, and they were asking her questions, and she was answering, and they gave her emotions like facial features, like she would smile, raise her eyebrow. So what you just said, like you saw something. I don't know if you've seen that video, but there's a citizen in Arabia that's completely robot with AI intelligence and can respond back and forth like me and you.
Right. I haven't seen that video, but the technology has advanced to the point where the artificial intelligence is real, meaning that they are making computers with the ability to learn as human beings. And they have programmed certain different emotions and responses that will be very human-like. This is a reality.
All right, my question is the study speaking from a future tense into the past tense?
Right.
Okay.
This reading, because the master explained our evolution. So basically, this is explaining our evolution of how we are going from our state to the state that is more like the Greys. Because many of the depictions of the Greys, they don't have varying skin colors. They have the large head. They have the large eyes. They don't have the satellite folds that we know as ears. This is all part of our evolution that he's explaining, that these beings came from the future to our present, back to our present, and this is where we are going eventually.
Tua, so this would tie into, I remember listening to a class that's speaking about how we are morphing as human beings. Okay.
Exactly. So because of, again, all the things that he's describing, when the human being was created, especially certain breeds who were created as what we know as the Lulu Amalu, who was a being that was designed to work. Nowadays, there is less and less physical labor, right? And as a result, the human being will eventually, because of lack of using the muscles, those muscles will not develop the way our grandfathers were. You know, many of us who had a grandfather, we had that Big Daddy, who was literally a very big man, big hands in our families. And that is slowly fading. You can see that slowly fading out, that human beings is becoming smaller. The muscles are not being used because there's not much physical labor anymore. And the way the body is designed, it deems anything that is not in use as unnecessary and literally cuts it off. And so this is what happens. For instance, a person is bedridden. They suffer from muscle atrophy. And because they're not using those muscles just don't develop. They literally turn to mush. The brain's like, okay, we don't need that. Right. So this is eventually the stage that where we're going because of our environments, because of our breeding, because of our habits. It is changing the human being. Any other questions?
Robert.
Robert.
Okay, this question ties into the first reading, really. And it ties into a conversation I was having, very long conversation I was having pertaining to belief systems in Jesusism, or, Ansar Allahism, or whatever schools we came from. And we were trying to figure out why it is that some people have such a difficulty grasping certain principles that we learn here in Wu-Nuwaup, right, just across the board. And what we agreed on was the fact that sometimes, even though we have Wu-Nuwaup and we have come from these schools and we get the facts and we study it and we are able to, remember it and then, tell it or teach it and what have you, that there's a big, there's a big gap between learning it into our brains and getting it to a place where we can apply it to our life. And so we discussed, and then, the concept of belief systems came up. What I mean by is, you can't just come from Christianity and then use the same belief systems, right, or attitudes or thought processes, right, that we had in religion, regardless of what religion you came in. Because the problem that we found is that it's the process of thinking or the way a person thinks that even if you have the truth, you would in turn stumble because your learning process is something that, or our learning process, I should say, is something that we haven't even looked at because we're still looking at it with a process that's faulty. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, it's not really a question, it's more like, how do we deal with the way we think so that we can get the information and be able to properly apply it so that it could actually work?
Okay, one word I noticed you use a lot in your question is process and processing. And when you think about a processor, you think about a computer. And that's what the brain essentially is. And computers speak a specific language. If you try to upload a certain program to a computer that it doesn't understand or that it's not familiar with, it's going to reject that program. That's how we work. You can integrate different software into that computer so it can begin to process the program execute the functions you wanted to execute for you, but ultimately it's not going to work as if that computer was designed for that specific function. And that's how we work. We understand that Wu-Nuwaup is a genetic doctrine. Those genes, while we do have the morphogenetic field and we have different things that can change our epigenome, who you are is who you are, and intelligence is part of your design. It's who you are. The hand, intelligence. That's not something that can be learned. There are some that will never grasp every single little aspect of Wu-Nuwaup, and that's where our patience comes in when we teach, when we're out there, when brothers are propagating. They're not going to reach everybody. It can be frustrating when you're trying to teach someone something and you can see it so clearly in your head and you understand it, but that person doesn't. And it doesn't mean they're a good person, it doesn't mean they're a bad person, it doesn't make them evil, it doesn't make them bad. It's just, it's not their time, or it's not the way that they, like you said, process information. My family, they're all, Jehovah's Witnesses, very religious. I can't get through no matter what I do. So sometimes you have to just leave people within their peace and you be the example, and just by you living that example of Wu-Nuwaup, that can make a difference. That sometimes you trying to push things on them or trying to explain things to them, that will set up a defense mechanism within their brain, and that processor will shut down. Do you understand? Does that answer your question?
So it answers partially very well. Because it's true, there's some people who are not going to grasp it.
Right.
Or maybe will take time. But you talked about, more or less, you addressed the problem of being able to share Wu-Nuwaup with another person, more or less. I was more or less looking at us in here first, because one of the things that I would say, one of my family members, right? Her jokes, or her comments are with me. It doesn't matter who's bringing me what. Let me see what it has done for you, right? Or they want to see certain results. So with her, she made a conscious decision to block, because the way she knows, and most people will be like this. They'll be like, all right, well, what are you doing with it, right? And so the more specific issue I wanted to address, because sometimes I could sit and I could think and I overstand something and then read it next year and then realize that I didn't overstand it because I didn't know what I didn't know, right? And so I'm trying to stay home and say, how do we in here do that check to overstand, to know that we're not just memorizing stuff and then thinking we understand it when we don't? Because in the 9-ball, I was reading the 9-ball, I love the 9-ball. The 9-ball, Pops breaks down how you learn, right? Or the fact that we have to learn how to learn, and he breaks down the 4 steps of learning. Like you have knowledge, then you have knowledge, understanding, overstanding, and then application. And then there was another one after that, right? That there's 4 steps. And I feel like just, and again, this is not looking outside. I feel like we're very good with the knowledge, the understanding, which is all part of memorization, but the overstanding to be able to apply it wisely, I think that's where there's a lot of gray areas. And I'm looking at self, I'm looking at how we're running, I'm looking at the issues that we're having with each other, because sometimes you might be in a place where you think you overstand, but you're still at understanding, right? So what's a good way to test yourself or gauge yourself to see how well you overstand before you can teach it to someone else and show them how to get a result? Does that make sense?
Yes and no. And I say that because only you can measure your own progress. So as far as a measuring stick or barometer to measure where you have come from to where you are right now is up to you. And it's like I explain this when people are when referring to the language. A lot of people will ask, how do I learn Nuwaubic? Where do I start? And I tell them, just speak it. Speak what you know. Start writing things down. Write down your sentences, your thoughts, things that you say be Englishuyi by way of English, and then try to translate them be Nuwaupoyi by way of Nuwaubic. And keep a record of that, and then look back. And you can see those changes within yourself. But that's for you. That's not anything that you should feel you need to prove to someone else to bring them into Wu-Nuwaup. If someone asks you, well, what is Wu-Nuwaup doing for you? You can give your experiences, but that's not going to mean anything to them because those are your experiences. It's not going to resonate with them. If someone wants proof of, okay, Wu-Nuwaup is the truth, this is the way, this is literally patarak, it's not going to resonate with them until they come in and they have Baba speak to their soul personally. That's why they should come to class, read the books, go to our websites, get the information, and then they need to process it in order for them to be able to overstand or begin to understand and come into the sound right reasoning. And the second part of your question was what again? You had a 2-part question.
It's you gauging yourself. It's not you worrying about so much what another person is saying. That was just an example I was using. Mm-hmm. It's really understanding our steps of learning and understanding when you remember something enough to teach it, because even us, and this is why we say we're student teachers. That's good, because we're humble, because we're still trying to overstand it. But very oftentimes, and I just know by questions that I've asked other teachers over the years,
that's going to happen. That's going to happen. You teach what you know. Like, I haven't been here that long. I just started teaching.
Sure.
And like, my mate will tell me, you teach what you know. If there's something you don't know or you're not familiar with, you don't stand up here and make up something. You tell the person or whoever, I don't know, but this is what I do know, because there will be as many books as Baba has written and as much information is out there, and us using our nine mind to connect the dots. There is a way to answer every question without leaving someone completely empty. And that's like that's how you teach. Sometimes teaching isn't giving an answer, it's giving someone the ability to think for themselves to go and find the answer. So you don't always have to be the master of every single answer. The only person who can do that is Panabab Yanun. We're his students. We're student teachers. We're all still learning.
Oh, that's good for that question. Tawhat.
And what you have to also understand as well is that you have to constantly be introspective of yourself and studying the information, because if you read the way the master teacher teaches, he teaches in layers. So you may go back and read a book or scroll that you read 3 years ago, and the levels of information that you didn't understand then will be so clear now, right? Because many of things, really, a lot of the stuff that the master writes, because our level of overstanding is not at that point, a lot of it goes over our head. And you have to constantly be studying. You have to, because he explained in the Black Book, there are 3 principles or aspects to the Nuwaupian, and that is the diligent inquirer, the seeker of truth, and the loyal. Those 3 attributes you have to have. So you have to be diligent in your studies, meaning that you study as much as possible, so that once you come to a point where there's something that you think you understand, it becomes, because one of the basic principles of Wu-Nuwaup is confirmation. So certain things will be confirmed the more you study them. You follow what I'm saying? So you in your diligence, in your due diligence of studying the knowledge, those things that you may feel you understand, that you found out later that you don't, it comes in time as you read and study more information, because the way the master writes, it's not in chronological order, and the information may be a portion in this book and a portion in this book, and then you're able to connect the dots. He explained that he writes and teaches a certain way so that you as a student are part of the learning process where you connect the dots with the 9 mind. You follow? So as you study, you read one scroll, you read another scroll, and you say, okay, that's what that was talking about in that scroll. You follow? So it's all in your diligent study of Wu-Nuwaup.
So just for clarity, that was good. Basically, don't ever assume that you know, even when you study something and recognize it, right?
No, it's not assuming that you know. You deal with confirmation. You know what you know.
Right.
And you articulate things based on your level of affirmation. And that's what you do. As long, the master said, if you say what I say, you'll never be wrong. It's really that simple.
But we do that. A lot of people go around repeating pops and sometimes not understanding really what he meant themselves, but they'll repeat him a lot.
Well, I mean, there are things that can easily be taken out of context, of course.
Right.
But again, it deals with it deals with confirmation.
Okay.
It deals with the context of what's going on. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Because, again, you can say, quote things from the Ansar school, from the Quran or things, but we know at this stage of Outformation, we know what those things mean now. You follow? When you're dealing with the deities of the Bible, the deities of the Quran, we are at a stage of Outformation where we know who those beings are. You follow what I'm saying? There are many who are stuck in different schools. And and what the master explained is that different people are stuck in different schools because he says specifically the religious schools, he says because those spirit forces in those schools don't want you to leave. They thrive and subsist off of certain individuals, and they rise to keep them stuck in those schools. You follow what I'm saying?
So that makes sense.
But you have to walk with the master teacher and be on the level where he is now. There are many who are still stuck in the Sumerian school. There are many and they don't understand where we are now, because that is one of the basic principles of our doctrine. It's about now, not the then in the future and the then in the past, the now. And so in now, where we are now, we know who those deities were or are. We know how they relate to us. We know which ones don't relate to us. We know where they fit in if you study and follow the doctrine of what we teach. Any other questions?
Rahobat.
Rahobat.
In the second reading, you read that the grays are coming. First, you said people are going to lose their pinky finger, pinky toes, and the outer ear. Is that right?
Wait, say that one more time. I didn't hear you.
Yes, that people, because of circumstances of the day, by not, you're going to lose muscles.
Exactly.
And, right, the pinky finger.
Right.
The pinky toes.
Right.
And the outer ear.
Right, and the outer ear, yes.
Okay. And everybody's going to look alike.
Right.
They're going to lose complexion as well.
Right.
And so everybody going to become grays.
Right.
And those same grays that's coming back now, they are coming back to find out what went wrong, or there's no race over there where they are.
No, it's not necessarily them coming back to find out what went wrong. He did explain that certain beings came, for instance, during the time of the bombing in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Certain beings came to really intercede because the human being was on a path of destruction. You follow? So, but he's basically explaining our evolution of where we are headed as a result of things that we are partaking of, from the lack of activity that we did in, say, our natural environment of Africa before the intervention of what they call modernization, where in order to heat your home, you had to cut down a tree. You follow? You had to, if you wanted some meat, you had to hunt animals. If you wanted vegetation, you had to farm. These were physical things which again require a certain muscular stature. As a result of our way we live now, we don't do those things. We go to Walmart. We want some food. You follow? We If we want to heat our home, we just pay our gas bill. You see what I'm saying? So those things are use of those muscles that were once used in our developmental stages are not used anymore. So that is going to cause our bodies respond to environmental changes. You follow? So things that we do physically, things that we intake, have an effect on our physical appearance. And so if we're not, not using those things, then they won't be prevalent. You know what I'm saying? This is why, different people, for instance, you may have a family of athletes. They produce a child, and it's very likely those athletic traits will be passed on to the child. You follow? But again, we are passing on certain traits because we're not using those things. Those genetic traits, it's your body is use it or lose it. That's basically how it works. And so that's what the reading is basically explaining.
And the beings that's coming back from, I think you said they're coming from the future, or?
I'll read what it says. It says that now many have been crossbred with humanoids. I'll start from the beginning. Each had their own group of grays, crossbred, cloned, and some biogenetic and biomechanic. Now many have been crossbred with humanoids, all races, and some are being born finally, which was the master plan. They came back from the future, back in machines, and replaced humans' emotions. And the use of mechanics altered the genetics physically and mentally, such as you have no need for the pinky finger and toe. With amplified speakers, the outside of your ears are not needed. Some male and female physical partners will be replaced with robotic humanoids who look and feel physical. That took place in your past here on Earth. So it's basically talking about things that have happened or will happen in the future and things that are happening in the present.
Okay, so hard.
Right. Rahubat.
I could be wrong, but I think her question is more so, what will be the purpose of these future beings to come in the past?
As far as the purpose, as outside of, again, what was explained during the Hiroshima and Nagasaki event, when certain beings came back because of the atomic bomb that was let off, the reading doesn't go into that. I would have to look and do more research to find out exactly why. Any other questions?
It wasn't a question. It was more like is this similar like you say how the pinky and the pinky toe is no longer going to be used no more? Is this sort of like the same as this is sort of? I'm gonna go on this side. Excuse me. Is it the same sort of like your appendix? How it really doesn't have use anymore? Like, well, some people get their appendix taken out, sort of like myself. And right. I've asked the doctor before, like, what's the purpose of an appendix? And it
right.
really has no use, other than from what I remember in the past, it was supposed to be connected with, I guess, your tonsils towards
right.
your barytheric gland. But through the removal of that, it's virtually useless, even though we're still right. born with it.
Right.
Same thing?
It's very similar. The appendix, the tonsils are organs in the body which right now have no function. But because of our main, as you mentioned, that barytheric gland being removed, which means that certain hormones which were be injected into the body, which causes different vibrations of the body and things of that nature don't happen. So those things are not utilized. So the doctor, if it inflames, they just take it out. Your tonsils inflame, they take it out. Your appendix inflames, they take it out because it's not a necessary organ in the body.
Tawasai.
Any other questions?
Tawhat, when you were answering my question, you went into three things that you do when you're studying. I was trying to write it down. Do you remember?
You said when I answered the question?
Yes, you were talking about being diligent when you're studying.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
The diligent inquirer, the seeker of truth, and the loyal.
The diligent what?
Inquirer.
Right.
Diligent inquirer.
Right. Seeker of truth.
Seeker of truth, and the loyal.
The loyal.
Loyal, yes.
Where? Okay, so, all right. I guess you were speaking to the process and the fact that you stick to it, and if you don't know something, you keep searching for the answer, and you wait for the confirmation.
You just keep studying.
Gotcha.
And things become more and more confirmed the more and more you study. So again, as I said, the way the master teaches, there are layers to it, and certain things that may be touched on in one book is further expounded on in another. So in your diligent study of Wu-Nuwaup, information that you may have a slight overstanding of, that overstanding becomes more abundant the more you study.
More clear. Tawhat.
Any other questions? I would definitely like to thank everyone for coming out. Every week here, Pa Maparar, number 1, question and answer class, or new Outformation class. We would do our best to give you the information as relayed from the master teacher to you. Tawhat, Wado.